investigating ET phenomena for years, as well as the UFO subject. Why do you believe, the panel, why do you believe the government has chosen now to disclose their UFO investigative efforts? And what is the significance of the government UFO surveillance? Now, with that, before we address the question, I want to have Sharon come up and share about a production entitled Packing for Mars. I'll let her take it from here.
Great, thank you, Daniel. We have a big question before us on our government and why there has been a fight about how much we disclose in our disclosure, as well as internationally, there are times when governments will disclose and not disclose. So it's a big subject, and there can be a lot more conversation on it. What I'd like to do is just give you a little something from an international perspective. We're going to look at a clip from a documentary that was made a little over a year ago, and it's called Packing for Mars. And it's One Man's Journey for Truth, and it's Frank Jacob who produced this, as well as Tonya Bailey. If anyone is interested in seeing their official website, they can go to www.packingformars.com and look them up. What I want for, there's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of information out there, tons of it everywhere, and you just kind of piece it together. What I want to show with this is a sense of these secret space programs that we know of. So they're not so secret. The U.S. Navy has one, the U.S. Air Force has one. Many large corporate organizations have some. And this clip I'm going to show you has to deal with the Vatican. The Vatican has a secret space program too. The 1% in this world, worldwide, owns 83% of the wealth in the world. And many of this 1% would like to deal with catastrophe by either being off-world or underground. And there is an effort that affects the disclosure of the ET phenomenon that is connected to that. This past December, there was an article in Forbes magazine about a $21 trillion deficit in our government accounting budgets over the past 2 decades. And a wonderful Mark Skidmore, professor of economics at Michigan State University, took it on himself and his students to go through line by line of thousands of pages of documents of these accounting procedures of our government to find out how this $21 trillion disappeared. This is $21 trillion that comes from your paycheck. This is $21 trillion that comes from us as responsible citizens who hope that our government is being responsible to us. So how are these secret space programs paid for? I would say that some of it definitely comes out of the $21 trillion in this country. But I do want to show, this is a clip, and the clip is of a whistleblower from the Vatican. He's a Jesuit priest, and his name is Luca Scantamburlo. He is in charge of the observatory, one of the 2 big observatories of the Vatican. So I feel that as a Jesuit priest with the Vatican and being a whistleblower, he has some credibility that would be worth putting into your consciousness about what is going on in the bigger picture out there. There is a reality of secret space programs among different governments, as well as the Vatican and many other corporate organizations, and that they are certainly taking astronomy for real. They're talking about Planet X and so forth. Now, Kathleen has come forward and said that in her paranormal dealings, I guess, that she has become aware that that Planet X issue is going to be not an issue for us. There are many who are saying that we do have watchers, guardians, who from other planets who are very careful to help us out. If you go to YouTube and look up the Black Knight satellite, they say that's been circling our planet for 50,000 years, and that we are nicely protected. So there are many theories on it, and you can look into it. But just to give you an idea that there's serious money being spent in certain space programs and so forth. That's just the comment from the web. No, that will be on the next. We have another question number 4, and then Jane.
So, due to our time constraint here, we want to go over these next few questions in a more succinct manner so that we can go ahead and get to you guys with the questions that you may have as well. So, again, number 3, recently the U.S. government revealed that the Pentagon has been investigating the ET phenomenon for years. Why do you believe the government has chosen now to disclose their UFO investigative efforts, and what is the significance of the government UFO surveillance programs?
Just jump right on in here. You'll have to forgive me, I had a brain injury about a year ago, so sometimes my speech is a little if you look back historically at the interactions between our government or the military and extraterrestrials, the first few times that we ended up encountering them, we pretty much got our butt kicked. I don't want to scare anybody with that, but it's like, if you look back, the first one that comes to mind is in 1948, there was a Captain Thomas Mantell, who was a National Guard fighter pilot in Kentucky, flying a P-51, which at the time, in 48, that was one of the fastest aircraft that were around. And he was on the radio with the tower, and he engaged an aerial vehicle of unknown origins, and he tried to chase it, and it didn't end too well with it. Matter of fact, he ended up dying from it. If you flash forward to the 50s, I think it's 52, in Washington, D.C., a large group of aircraft of unknown origins took airspace over the Capitol building, and they scrambled by this time they have fighter jets. They scrambled fighter jets to engage these unknown aerial vehicles, and they found out that they couldn't keep up with them. So probably what you're looking at for the longest time, they kept things on the hush-hush until they could figure out how to deal with these things. Now, because of all the media attention that's out there and the number of movies, and it's kind of been softening up mainstream society to grip with the fact that, you know, there is something possibly else out there. And that's kind of my take on why finally the government's starting to come out and go, well, you know, maybe there is something out there. You can draw your own conclusions from that, though. I'm not here to try to force any thought on you. It's like whatever you want to think.
Anyone else like to address why the government has waited until now to disclose this effort, and what is the significance of these programs?
I thought I'll bring up just not really the why, but more of some important things that have happened that I've noticed over the last year. If you could do the vehicle. So yeah, it started, to me, basically early 2017, Robert Bigelow came out on 60 Minutes Okay, so yeah, you guys don't know, Bigelow is a very rich and very powerful man. Coming out on 60 Minutes saying that they exist, I mean, that just says that something's about to happen. I have one piece of information here that you guys don't know about, but July 2017 at the symposium, Jan Arzan, the executive director of MUFON, got in front of, we have our own field investigator meeting there. He got in front of everybody and basically told us straight off that disclosure is coming. His exact words, it will most likely be a drip disclosure, a little at a time over time. We are wanting the technology and those things that benefit humanity first. After disclosure, MUFON's role will be to provide information on disclosed tech and be a source of factual information, as everyone still will not trust the government. So I thought that, I was wondering why is he talking about this? And then 4 months later, I see this program, To the Stars Academy. I would queue it up, but it's like 4 or 5 minutes, so we're kind of short. Just you can go to tothestarsacademy.com and it's the front page. With that, they started with the end of the year, like December through March. They started doing these videos that's starting to bring everybody out. Last weekend, Luis Elizondo, along with Jan Arzan with MUFON, did a coast-to-coast talk on the radio. And one of their big things is that they're going to be starting to study this meta material. It's basically coming out saying that, hey, we have this meta material, and pretty soon we're going to be releasing what it is and what it does. Next week, Luis is actually going to be at the MUFON Symposium, which that, I think it's in Arizona, or no, it's New Jersey. Yeah. So if you're interested in seeing that, I think, I'm actually going to get the live MUFON subscription just so that I can watch that, because I think that since Jan Arzan is working with Luis and them so much, it seems, I think that possibly they're going to be holding something off for MUFON, some big announcement for the MUFON meeting. Basically, disclosure is coming. You can't get around it now.
Here's a picture of Louis Elizondo.
We do have a flyer here, and for anyone interested, I would recommend coming and using your phone to take a picture of it, because we have that one there.
Well, once again, you can go to www.mufon.com and see this.
And he's the keynote speaker.
So we're going to move along and answer these next few questions together. I'd just like to mention this fourth one in a different light. So we have the question, several scientists have argued that the likeliest forms of alien life are microbes, which has recently been in the news and media about other celestial bodies here in our solar system having the right circumstances for that. So we'll go ahead with the premise that there already are microbial life forms out here in the galactic or even solar neighborhood. And we'll say the revealing of such phenomenon, panel, do you find this could be another step toward this disclosure movement? For the revealing of scientific information regarding microbial life on other celestial bodies like planets and moons in our own solar system, the revealing of that information, do you find that this could be a step, a minor step toward, as Jeremy said, a dripping form of disclosure?
I'd like to back up just a minute and talk to scientific research from the indigenous people that I have lived and studied with, and ancient findings all over the planet concerning alien life forms, and certainly the cave drawings. I've stayed with the Hopi Lakota and the Choctaw in Peru and in Hawaii, down in Mexico, and many indigenous people that I've studied with have said that as of 2012, when the world is supposed to, should ought to have ended, and Hollywood said so, that in fact was a time where the third dimensional reality of this planet was then moving to a higher frequency, which means that the Earth, this planet, a sentient being called Gaia, is moving through the Milky Way as we speak, and is basically, if you had to put it in a term of measurement, we're about 3/4 of the way through our old third dimensional reality of the universe. And so we are now frequentially going between a 3D and a 5D frequency, which means it's a higher vibration. The Earth is at a higher vibratory field. That means that people on the planet are having to also look at their third dimensional realities, their belief systems, which are now coming up to deal with, because you can't go at a higher frequency and take those belief systems with you. So the end time, as they say, we're right smack dab in the middle of it, and come 2020, 2029 on the outside of this, will be when we will have shifted, this planet Earth will have shifted into a fifth dimensional frequency. That means, basically, that it's just not microbial things you'll be seeing in that fifth dimensional frequency. We're going to have spaceships that people will be seeing, and much more regularly than those that just spot them in the air now. Because the frequency at a higher realm, which they're unable to do, if you will, move down to a lesser 3D frequency, which most people won't see spacecraft flying around. And once you hit 5D, they're going to become pretty normal. So just FYI, prepare.
So we may be continuing to see all sorts of phenomena in the next several years.
Absolutely.
Varying nature. So these next two questions I'll combine into part one and part two. The first one, number 5, is can you disclose any alien and UFO sightings in the DFW area, and has the state, local, or national government done anything to investigate or address these sightings? Now, this is the first part. The second part is basically the same question, but for non-Western countries. So, can we disclose any information regarding alien and UFO cases, not just in the DFW area, which we'll address first, but then secondly, in non-Western countries like Africa, Middle East, Asia, Australia, and so on. So we'll start, and I'll just actually make a mention. There was a term used in the segment from Packing to Mars that the priest had described the alleged vehicle through the pictures he was showing, which he called Aurora, which I think is no coincidence, as here in Texas in 1897, we had the incident in Aurora, Texas, where allegedly an object fell from the sky, crashed, left an enormous amount of metallic debris in the remains of a body which was described as not being an inhabitant of this world. The metal seems to be of some kind of exotic origins and has since been lost, but it's possible that the material could have been acquired by a government and military agency, and then, of course, through speculation you can see where things could go from there. And there's a lot of information that suggests that something did happen, whether it was alien or not, we're not certain, but I think there's an interesting trail of evidence to suggest that whenever anyone encounters exotic materials, either through a crash circumstance or through a close encounter, they end up with some degree of radiation, and this is a common trait in many of these UAP experiencers. So again, we'll address the local sightings here in the DFW area. We'll go ahead and start. Sure, if we want to announce one of our guests in the audience here. We've got Billy Hallmon, who is 78, and he had a nuts and bolts UFO experience. Joined the U.S. Navy in 57 at the age of 17 and served as an interior communications electrician, and graduated from TCU, which is Texas Christian University, in 68, with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. He's attended the Alliance Air Show with his daughter each year for 20 plus years, and had no interest in, nor any opinion of, flying saucers before the age of 73. In 2009, he retired from the AT&T company as a director artist with 52 years in the U.S. workforce. And in 2013 and 2014, he saw what he believes was the same utility vehicle operating over northeast Dallas. And during the second sighting, he hit from this vivid UFO, which radically changed his concept of reality. And today, Billy believes that he has a social obligation to report everything that he's seen. And his field investigator in 2014 was Tommy Diamond, who we have here on the panel, and his was also featured for the cover story of February 2015 in the MUFON Journal. So we'll let Billy come over here to the stand and share about his experience in the plot material.
I'm Billy Hallmon, and I live in northeast Dallas. I've had 4 sightings, but I'm just talking about 2 today, which I believe were the same UFO. My first sighting was in December of 2013 at 8 p.m. It was a cold and clear night. There was a half moon about 65 degrees to my southwest. I saw a wedge-shaped shadow against the night sky about 3 or 4 miles distance. No light, no sound. The apparent size was about as big as the facial feature of a man in the moon. Eye, nose. So it was pretty small. It was about airplane size, about 3 or 4 miles distance. It moved upward at about 1,000 miles an hour, and I lost it in the moon's glare and inferred that it went into space. The sighting was distant, vague, and I did not report it or mention it to anyone. My second sighting was 6 months later at 11 p.m. on June 13, 2014. I'd gone to Gold's Gym in northeast Dallas and was walking home through a residential neighborhood near Hexter Elementary School. Sky was clear with a full moon to the southeast. I'm walking northward in the middle of the street, and there's some trees directly ahead to my right, and as I walk by these trees, a bright light comes up over the trees and stops. And I had the feeling that this thing had seen me coming up the road and was sneaking up on me here. So it stops above me, and I immediately turn and step off under the tree to hide. The UFO looked like my diagram.
It's in front of the podium.
It's here. Looking up from it, from the bottom, it looked above me like this. I was looking up at the belly of the plane. I mean, the UFO. The green lights were steady. The red lights pulsed on and off together on about a 2-second cycle. It always moved in the direction of the red lights. It was slightly smaller than a Southwest 737. After I hid, the UFO began to search around, and it emitted a sizzling sound. So here I had eye and ear confirmation of an actual nuts and bolts machine. After about 3 minutes, the UFO stopped and then shot downward at a 90-degree horizon. It went about 1 mile and 5 seconds, which would translate to 720 miles an hour, or about Mach 1. When it dove, it became transparent and ghost-like from the UFO, when it was up here, it looked like a solid craft, like an airplane would look. But when it shot down, it looked like a light image. There was no acceleration against inertia, nor deceleration against momentum. Its operational sizzling sound could no longer be heard. There was no compression against the atmosphere, no sound. Apparently, there were no fatal G-forces from starting and stopping from sitting here to an instant 720 miles an hour. The red lights continued to blink on a 2-second cycle, so there was no time change within the UFO. I could still see the lights blink about 2 times during that 5 seconds before it went behind the houses. It disappeared behind the far roof lines, and I could better determine its distance and size by comparison to foreground objects. It was just instantly, but I could see about how far away it was, and verify that I'd seen something about a mile up. My personal conclusions about the UFO was that it was probably a utility vehicle that was snatching people off the street. That was the impression I got from the first and second sighting. And the other conclusion is that there are several generations of technology between our airplanes and this UFO. The best explanation of what I saw the UFO do, this is what I actually saw it do, has been given in this book by Robert Schroeder, and on his YouTube videos. He gives a very good explanation of all these points that I've made, that I saw the thing when it dove.
Thank you.
Thank you, Billy, for that fascinating account. I actually had the opportunity to work with Robert Schroeder, the author of that book as well, and made a video production of the presentation he gave down in Del Rio, Texas, during one of the conferences they had a few years ago. And he shares, again, as Billy said, some fascinating physics side of the information that we could be dealing with, alternate propulsion systems, things of that nature. So, again, when we're dealing with the local area of cases, sightings, and encounters, we're honored to be able to have another guest with us here today, which I'll let Sharon come up and introduce for us.
I'd like to introduce Jane Nelms. And Jane, would you like to speak from the podium or from the floor, wherever you want? Let me do a little intro for Jane. Jane Nelms is an experiencer, and we are so glad that she is willing to share her experiences with us. It takes an awful lot to come forward. It really, really does. She is what we have termed a multiple abductee, now living in Texas. She was from England. Her father was a futurist with the British Aircraft Company, and he predicted the future of guided weapons missiles, nanotech, and AI. He was knighted by the Queen. Jane believes his life may have been connected to her abduction experiences. As a young person, Jane felt different and did not fit in due to strange happenings. She was an acrobat in a balancing act and performed all over England, working with Tom Jones and the Four Tops. She had a good agent, I think. Her contract took her to West Africa in 1965 when the Civil War broke out. She was kept as a hostage for 6 months, her passport taken away. She witnessed many horrifying things and saved 7 people from being killed. She contracted malaria and survived. Her contract was to take her to Beirut, Baghdad, Tehran, Hong Kong, and Tokyo, but instead in 1971, Jane moved to America. In 1974, due to a foot surgery, she had her first realization of her past abductions. Jane will tell you more. Please, let's welcome Jane Nelms.
you, everybody, for what I'm going to speak about. I'm not a speaker, but I have to get across to people my experiences. It's very important. As Sharon said, in 1974, I was living in North Richland Hills. I'd had foot surgery, which had gone wrong. I went to lay down. I was going to read a book. I like medical books. And all of a sudden, I looked up at the clock. I had a wind-up clock with a bell at the top. I saw the time was 11:20, and my ex-husband was in the room watching television, not in the bedroom. I saw a bright light, so bright it came through the curtains. I wasn't sure what it was because there was no noise, and I knew it wasn't a car. A car couldn't be 2 stories up, and it wasn't a helicopter. And I called out to my ex-husband, "What is the bright light that's coming through the window?" And he didn't answer. I went to the window and I pulled the drape slightly apart, and within seconds there were 5 beings that surrounded me. I had no control. They were all dressed in navy blue with hoods. They were not the normal looking greys that everybody knows about. The next thing I know, I'm standing in the road, on Pipeline Road, if anybody knows where that is, in North Richland Hills, and I'm worried because my nightdress is not pulled down, and I knew that these beings were surrounding me. I could not move, and I was fighting. Then I hear a voice, and it says to me, "Jane, it is your time to come." And I said, "I'm not going anywhere." And for some reason, I knew they were not from here, but I had never seen them. And when I was speaking to this, whatever I thought it was, at first I thought it was a suit of armor from across the border. And then I looked again and I realized this was not a suit of armor. This was a creature from not this planet. And so he took me on the ship. It was in between the 2 sections of the apartments. I believe the only building on that street back then was a fire station. That was 74. In 1985, I moved with my second husband. My first husband was killed. My second husband moved me to a 2nd-story house in Carrollton. I'm sure you're familiar with Carrollton. At that time, there was a Skaggs Albertsons there where I shopped. There were all kinds of things happening. My clocks were rewinding themselves. The phone would ring in the night. I would have all these strange things happen. I'd be floated out of my bed, and then black helicopters would appear outside, so low and deafening that I just couldn't bear the thought of what was happening. I'm not a person that is afraid easily or scared, but this was frightening. I went to Skaggs Albertsons one morning to get some cranberry juice because I had a constant problem with bladder infections, and I didn't realize that it was from constant contact with the greys. As I was at the grocery store before I went to work, I worked in oral and maxillofacial surgery for 23 years. And I went to the store. It was 6:45 in the morning. And I had to be at work by 7:30 in surgery. I looked down to look for the cranberry juice, and then I saw this man, or what I thought was a man. He was about 6'4". He was all in black. He had a very pale face, dark sunglasses, and the usual men in black look. They are real. I was in one aisle, I went to another aisle, and wherever I went, they were there. Then I got threatening phone calls. They even called my neighbors and told me, if your friend does not stop talking about this subject, we are going to put her in Terrell, which is a mental institution. I told them where to go. I won't tell you exactly what I said, but I did. In 1989, my mother passed away. I went back to England, and in 1991, my sister was the only other person I told about it, other than the people I worked with, and I sat everybody down and told them, regardless of whether I was going to get fired or not, but I didn't. But my sister told me there was a book about, if everybody knows, Communion by Whitley Strieber, who I've met, and I thought the book was about me, which was ridiculous. My sister passed away right after she told me about this. And it got to the point where I was having so many visitations and they were taking ovum from me to produce. And I went to my chiropractor who lived in Richardson. I told him about my stories and I cried in his office. He reached down in his drawer and he gave me a card, and on it was the Ufology Society in Plano. And so he said, these people will help you. He used to work, Rick Freeman, for the Pentagon. He was in intelligence, and he told me that if I knew what he knew, then I would be shocked, and he could not discuss it with me. The Ufology Society, when I got there, I was so amazed that there were other people like me. I didn't realize that I was not the only person on this planet. I found others like me. So the support group became my home, and I met my husband there, who was also an experiencer. The support group, I became the vice president and then the president, and we visited East Texas, where we had a friend who was an abductee also, or an experiencer. We saw many things out there, and a dear friend of ours who was part extraterrestrial passed away a year ago last Christmas. In 1994, the people behind me in Carrollton knew that I worked for the Ufology Society, and one of their daughters, who was 9, used to walk with me and my dog every night around, and there was Columbian Club golf course behind where we lived. She knew I belonged to a ufology society and knew about UFOs. And one night at 11:20, when I was alone in the house, and those were the times when I wouldn't go to bed at night, I knew as the sun came down, they would be there. They were watching me constantly. I was in great fear, I can tell you that. And it was 20 past 11, and again I was in my nightdress. I changed into a t-shirt and shorts, and as I stepped outside to get in the pickup truck, it was like the Twilight Zone. All the crickets stopped, every car noise on the street stopped, everything went so silent you could have dropped a pin. It was amazing, and I thought, I have no fear. I have no fear. I have to do these to help these people. And so I grabbed my Nikon 35mm, and I grabbed a book with lines that I could write on, a pad, and I went to the house, which was just around the cul-de-sac. The woman was standing, the mother, who did not speak much English, was porch, and she was beckoning me. I'm panicking. I went inside, and the whole family, which except for the father and the son who are working night shift, the family consisted of three women and a baby, and they told me they were all huddled together on the sofa as though they had been in a Holocaust. I had to show no fear. I worked for the Ufology Society. I was here to help people. As much fear as I had to help these people. I went around the house and turned all their lights off, and they were all grabbing a hold of me from behind, and we were like a snake going through the house. And the woman said to me, she said, "They're all in the house." And I said, "It's okay. They're not going to hurt us. Don't worry about it." So I got my camera and I put it on flash, and I stepped up to the sliding glass door. The sliding glass door did have some smudges on it, but there were no other lights. And I stood up and I took the picture, 2, 3 pictures. And the gray entity was in a fetal position and came straight through the solid material from the kitchen, right in front of my camera. I knew, and he told me through telepathy that he wanted me to capture him. And they told me when I lived in Carrollton, they specified that I would be working for them. I didn't know what they meant, but they told me, "You are going to work for us." I then found out later that they wanted me to be a calmer. I'm one of those who is going to help people who is not understanding what is happening to them, who is afraid like I was. I saw many things in Africa that nobody would want to see when there was a civil war on. I was 19. That was nothing compared to being face to face with an extraterrestrial with his face this close to you. So anyway, the family split up, and it was a tragedy. I used to walk 3 miles when my husband and I moved to Winsboro, which is out in farming country in the middle of nowhere. For some reason, when we moved there, and he moved me out there because one reason I had a lot of medical problems with my body. And so we also were interested in seeing the extraterrestrials out there. It was quite a hot spot where we were living. And I walked 3 miles. I got up at 5:45 every morning, and I put on my shorts and t-shirt, and I just started jogging and walking, and it was like I was pushed to do it. I don't know how I went out in pitch darkness, knowing I was going to see something. I don't know why. Whether they were controlling my mind, I don't know. All I know is I have no fear. I walked 3 miles every day. I missed 1 day in 3 years because of the ice, and I couldn't stand up on the oil road. After 2.5 months, instead of looking around all the time to see what was looking at me, I heard somebody tell me, "Don't look around, look up." I looked up, and there's this beautiful red orb pulsating above the trees. And it followed me all down the road. This happened every day. It would turn opaque as became more light in the morning. And I have had some very interesting situations walking those lanes. I used to take different items to show them, like a fossil or a crystal or something of interest. And they acknowledged it, and one day my flashlight was not working. And I was really cussing my flashlight because it could not light up anything in the street, and it was pitch dark. And all of a sudden, they were just hovering right across above the trees. All of a sudden, my flashlight just beams this just right at 25 foot either side and in front of me, and I knew they did that. I said, thank you. And that flashlight never worked properly before that happened. And then I still have that flashlight. But that's what happened then. But then they told me to meet them. And so one morning, the craft was a scout craft. It was not a large UFO. There are several sizes. The one that took me, that was in Carrollton, was about 60 foot long. But this was a scout ship, about the size of a car. And they scout around, and my husband and I call them the ride crew, because once you get to know them, they play jokes on you. And so they put on a show for me one day with my Labrador on our walk. And I can't tell you how excited I am to tell people about this. There was a house being framed out about a mile out from where we lived. And I was kind of annoyed that there was another house being built because I liked it the way it was. And it was my own private area for ETs. And my dog was stationless in the middle of the street, and he was looking to the right. And I said, Boomer, what are you looking at? And I looked over, and I went, oh my God. And there was 3 brilliant red orbs about the size of bigger than beach balls. I was about 50 foot from them. And they came out one at a time, about this tall from the ground. They spun around, they elevated, all 3 of them together. And then they tilted, and they went 1, 2, 3. One in the front turns around, rotates, and goes all the way to the back. The second one does the same, goes all the way to the back, and they look like a seesaw. And there's 3 lined up. And I'm watching this, and I'm going, how do you do this? And they're saying to me, we're showing you what we can do. Then a 4th one comes out. The 3 of them, they do this like they're on the stage. And they do this, they go out and disappear behind the house or the framed house. And then one solitary one comes out. It spins around, comes up like this, and then it's gone. And I'm like, my God. And I said, thank you. You put on a show for me. And I think that the way they had formed this line was almost like looking at Zeta Reticula, where they're from. I think they were giving me a message. I have been in the hospital with serious illnesses and died twice. That man there saved my life in the kitchen. And I'm forever grateful for that. And the last time I had a very interesting experience was in 2015. And I was alone, okay, and I saw all of a sudden the wind blowing and the trees and everything. And I saw all of a sudden, I felt they were there. I knew it, I could feel the feeling and everything. I told them I'm not afraid, and I'm trying to hurry this, I know, I've got to go, but The next thing I know is the one I know is looking through the window, and he's right beside me within seconds. And he tells me, "You have done well." And I said yes. And he asked me, he pointed, I have another dog now called Wilbur. He asked me, "Who is this?" I told him it was my friend, and I asked him if I could touch his arm. He was wearing not a jumpsuit this time, all in one. He was wearing a loose garment, and his right arm and his nails were longer than they normally are, and I told him that these nails look different. I asked him if I could touch his skin, and he said yes. And it felt like a mushroom. And then, after that, he was gone. And that's about it, but there's so many other things I have not time to tell you all of them.
Takes a lot of bravery and courage to come up in front of an audience and share about something of this nature. And we're very fortunate to have both Billy and Jane be able to come up and share their personal experiences. So let's give them both another round of applause. So, on the last question, being regarding the local sightings in the areas, I know that we've had quite a few that we can cover here, and of course the non-local ones, the non-Western ones as well. I'd just like to mention that we have had several throughout the years, even historical cases such as Aurora in the 1800s. One I'd like to make mention of, though, is that recently Dr. Eric Davis of the Pentagon's program ATIP has come forward on Coast to Coast to reveal that a confirmed crash site of not just New Mexico, but the one in Del Rio is something that they've been investigating as well. I had the opportunity to go down there to the crash site, the closest location you can go to on the U.S. border side, because it's actually across on the Mexican border side where an object had crashed and was recovered and taken back over the border in '55. So that's been confirmed since, and that's south, that's by the Big Bend over there. Another would be in 2008, we had an enormous UFO flap in Stephenville, Texas. And I'd like to see if any of our panelists here, any of the MUFON field investigators would like to just make a mention of that.
Sure. I'm sorry. So, how, by show of hands, how many people are familiar with the Stephenville incident? That's good. That's just one kind of reverts back to some of the earlier questions about whether or not the military's involvement or anything was involved with that incident. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but when that incident first occurred, for about 2 weeks, the Air Force swore up and down that they had no involvement, had nothing to do with that incident at all. And Robert Powell, who's one of our scientific investigators and the higher up of MUFON, did a really extensive investigation on that particular event, receiving radar data and etc. on the incident. And actually, there's some slides. Let me see which slide it is. Looks like 27. So, on January 8th, 2008, Stephenville gained national media attention when a large number of residents reported observations of a large UFO. Many witnesses described the craft as the size of a football field or the size of a flying Walmart. That's how large this thing was. What's not known by a lot of people is that out of Carswell, then I think it's Joint Reserve Base Carswell. I'm one of these old school people that are always referred to as Carswell Air Force Base. Carswell scrambled 4 F-16 fighters to go out and check it out. Of course, they swore up and down they didn't have anything to do with it at all. They also diverted an AWACS out of Tinker Air Force Base, which is up in Oklahoma, about 150 miles, 160 miles on the other side of the border from here. They diverted an AWACS to come down and coordinate with the F-16s. There were a number of aircraft that were on approach or departure from DFW that reported having seen this object, and also the constable Leroy Gayton, he's in 29, yeah, okay, I'm not sure, reported seeing the object as well. It was so fast he couldn't track it with his binoculars. This thing was so large that and it returned back 10 months later in October. When it came back, this thing is so large that I don't know how many of you are familiar with NOAA. NOAA is the National Weather Service around here. They have the weather radars that you see all the time. This thing was so large it showed up on NOAA radar and it looked like a thunderstorm just popped up out of the middle of nowhere. This would be something that you would envision straight out of that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's up there, okay. So it shows up on radar not only for NOAA but also DFW radar, the air flight control radar. So Robert Powell was able, through the Freedom of Information Act, to get this data from not only NOAA but from the FAA and include it in his report. That just goes to show you how close these things are around here and how they come in and out of our airspace around here. As far as the Stephenville one being that large, my assumption, because it's not a hypothesis, I can't scientifically repeat it, but my assumption is if you go out to Brownwood, which is just a little ways from Stephenville, there are huge, huge, huge radio direction towers and television towers out there. And so it's my thought that they're using these towers to navigate off of. In other words, they shoot an approach like you would see an aircraft shooting an approach to an airport, and they come in from wherever off these and focus in on these large beams to navigate off of. I had a case back in, I believe it was 2015, where a law enforcement officer in the Wiley area had an observation. And when I went to do the investigation and to interview him, I got to looking around, and sure enough, there's flight navigation towers out there for the approach coming into DFW that are in that area. And the way he described it, and as we walked through the investigation, where he was located and where these large towers are, it was between those two where this vehicle entered into the atmosphere and then trailed off toward a large thunderstorm to the northeast. So, yeah, it was the fact that you had a law enforcement officer credibility.
So that's a really more recent, and this would be the 10th anniversary of the Stephenville incident. Some other notable ones would be the Levelland, Texas case, as well as the Cash Landrum case, which is just outside of Houston, Montgomery County, where in 1980, Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum basically came onto an old country road in which they saw a large glowing diamond-shaped craft. It stopped their car, they felt it got too hot in the car, and they got close to the object, which emitted a very high temperature of heat, and they both, all three actually, and their son as well, ended up getting sick. Betty ended up losing her hair, and they tried to, and not just to mention they got close to this, but that it later was escorted off by several black helicopters. So they tried to sue the United States military to no avail, and never got any form of care for their medical issues. So with that, I think there are a lot of just very fascinating Texas cases